when you want to create a relaxing and calming look to your bedroom, it's important to think about the colors that you choose. But what's also important is to think about what versions of those colors are really going to create a calming look and feel to the room. Hi everyone, it's Carol from Discover Interior Design, and I'm so glad you're here. In this video, we're going to talk about how to create a calming look and feel to a bedroom, but we're going to be talking about which versions of colors to use that will help you create that look. So let's get started. So when you want to create a calming look in your bedroom, it's important to really choose colors that create a calming look. But what is also super important is to choose the version of that color that will create that relaxing and soft look that you're going for. So when you choose maybe a color that is naturally calming, like blue or green, we can find blues and greens in a variety of versions. And some of those versions will be very calm and soothing. But then there are other versions that are much more energetic and vibrant and are the opposite of creating a calming environment. So that's where we want to choose just the right blue or just the right green to create that calming look and feel that we're going for. And one way to do that is through saturation. So saturation just has to do with how much color is in a color, how intense that color is. And so a color can be very intense. There can be some very intense blues and greens, for example, but there can also be some very calming and more toned down versions of those colors where there's less color in there. It's just a little softer and a little bit more toned down. And that's what we're going for, is a calming look to our bedroom. So we want to think about the intensity of a color. Because the more saturated a color is, the more it's going to give us a really nice, stimulating, energetic look. But if that color is just toned down a little bit and it's less saturated, then that creates a calmer and softer look. And those colors can be, maybe lighter colors, but also they could be even darker, deeper colors. And both of those can create that calming look. One way we can look at saturation is even just on paint samples. And if we look at these blues here, they're very saturated, very vibrant and energetic. But on these versions over here, they're much more toned down and a little bit softer. But there are darker and lighter versions of those colors, but they still have that nice, softer and soothing look. And then an easy way to find out which version of a color is a little less saturated, a little less intense, a little more toned down, is just to place colors next to each other. So whether that's fabrics or paint or any other material that you're using, and you have to decide between which version is going to be a little bit more toned down, just place them next to each other. And then you can see right away that there's going to be one that's a little bit more intense. And so you probably want to choose the other one because it'll be a little less intense and a little bit softer. So after you choose a version of a blue or a green or any other color that has a nice soft look to it, then the next thing to think about is contrast. And contrast is a design principle. So one of those principles that we use to make sure that a design is both functional and beautiful. And contrast has to do with relationships between different elements in a room. It could be, relationships between different colors or styles even, or textures. And contrast is a way of adding variety to a room. So we're not just using one thing everywhere, that there is a nice contrast between repetition and variety. And one type of contrast you can use to help you choose just that right color to create a calming look in your bedroom is to talk about color value and how much contrast there is between different lightnesses and darknesses of a color. That's all color value is. And when we're talking about color value, the lightness and darkness between colors, there can be a very high contrast, between those two differences, or there can be a much lower contrast. So for instance, in a higher contrast, that would be where we're using a very light color with a very dark color. And there's a lot of contrast there. And that means that there's going to be probably a more energetic look and feel to that room. And there's going to be a much more definite contrast, a definite transition in between those different color values. So we can think of using white and black in a room. And, the lightest color we have is white and the darkest one we have is black. And using those two colors together creates a lot of contrast and, a very vibrant, energetic look. But if you want to create a calming look, that's where we want to lower the contrast between the different color values. And so we want to have similar color values, or where that range of the color values is very similar. And the transitions between those different values is much more subtle and much more smooth. So what that means is just choosing a nice color that has a calming look to it. But when you pair it with other colors, that all the other colors are in a similar value range. So there isn't this big contrast between light and dark, it's much more subtle. So that could mean that maybe you're using lighter colors together, or even mid-tones together, or even darker, deeper tones together. And there isn't a lot of contrast going on. All those transitions between lighter and darker colors is much more subtle. And then we can look at paint samples for examples of where we can kind of see some similar value and kind of low, subtle contrast. So for instance, you could start out with this nice, calming blue color. And if you wanted to bring in other blues into the room, maybe it would just be these really subtle transitions where it maybe gets a little bit darker and maybe a little bit lighter. And of course, you could kind of move up and around those areas a little bit, but you would still want to just kind of keep it kind of this nice, subtle, smooth transition between lightness and darkness. And maybe you are not necessarily going to use other blues in your room. You may be pairing up that blue or that other color that you really like with neutral colors or with other colors. Well, the same thing goes. You would want to make sure that those other colors that you're using with that blue are going to be kind of toned down versions, and also that all of the color values are going to be similar in that they're going to be in that same range where there's just this subtle transition between lightness and darkness. So one thing I encourage you to do to kind of notice saturation and contrast where you live is just to be in your bedroom and to notice how saturated or not saturated the colors are in that room, and then also if there's a lot of contrast between lightness and darkness, or is it a little bit more subtle? So share what you find out in the comments. And then if you have any other ideas that we can use to help create a calming and relaxing bedroom, please share those in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.